Hello, everyone, and welcome to another elite episode of the Get Authentic with Marques show. I'm your host, Marques Ogden. On today's episode, we are joined Mr. Patrick Mork. But before we get Patrick to the stage, I want to thank one of our amazing sponsors. This episode is sponsored by the Fran Dream. My story of finding control after failure is just one piece of proof this struggle is real for so many high achievers. I recently spoke with a brilliant leader, Anita Sarda. She was a top corporate executive, and she told me the moment she realized her path was wrong was when her 7-year-old son asked her the heartbreaking question, Mommy, who would you fire today? In that instance, she understood the legacy she was building was not the one she wanted for her family. If a top leader like Anita faced that emotional cost and found a clear system to redefine her legacy, you can too. This is a proven path to success that honors both your ambition and your family. It's time to trade the anxiety of the hustle for the security of ownership. To get a clear plan, go to podcast.thefrandream.com/Marques. That link is in the show notes. Again, that's podcast.thefrandream.com/Marques. Your secure legacy starts now. And now here he is, Patrick. How you doing today, Patrick?
Good. It's good to be here, Marques. Good to see you, man.
Thank you, my friend. You look fantastic. Great view. I hope as well. Patrick, first question, sir. What does the word authentic/authenticity mean to you?
It's a good question. I think we live in a world where there's like so much noise. I like the saying that people say that, we're basically drowning in news, but starving for wisdom. And I think, part of authenticity is it's being truthful, it's being honest, it's being yourself, it's maybe saying things that people need to hear but don't necessarily want to hear. And it's also saying it like it is. I think so many people, I get the feeling, are frustrated because they keep hearing things and messages from leaders and from others that they know are not necessarily the truth and are maybe being said to them to placate them in some way. So I think, being authentic is really about that. Sincerity, being yourself, being honest, being open, being vulnerable when the situation calls for that.
Patrick, I really love how you said having those conversations, talking about things that are difficult and tuning out the noise, right? I tell people noise is a bunch of chatter you can't understand. Follow signals, good information, good, thought process, good input. Like these are things that people need to hear. And Patrick is so correct, ladies and gentlemen. So many people talk about authenticity, but so many people don't really talk about authenticity because it's difficult to talk about because you have to be vulnerable and open up to the fact that you make mistakes just like anybody else. But a lot of people, right, Patrick, can't do that. Patrick, tell us more about yourself, your journey through your corporate experience, and what you're doing now to help your people and help your clients.
Yeah, sure, Marcus. So, I'm Belgian originally, right? Despite a very strong American accent, which kind of always throws people off. I've lived in 11 different countries, done 33 moves, worked in 6 different industries, been in like 6 or 7 different startups, started 3 companies. Most of my background is in technology companies. So, from 2000 to 2017, I was a serial chief marketing officer working in tech startups. Always kind of like one of the first guys into the job, as employee number 1 in marketing and hiring and building marketing teams from scratch. The sectors I worked in video games, I worked in mobile games, I worked in app stores for a long time when app stores were just getting started. I did a couple of stints in large corporations. So I spent the first 5 years of my career were at PepsiCo, where I learned everything about marketing and brand marketing and product marketing. And there I oversaw the launch of products like 7-Up, Pepsi Max, Diet Pepsi in South America. Then I spent a couple of years at Google, where I was hired to build and established the team that created Google Play, which is Google's app store. That's a $25 billion business today. When I joined the team, literally there were like three of us in marketing. It was called Android Market, and my team was tasked with creating the Google Play brand and launching it. And we went from, I think $700 million to $2.5 billion in about 18 months. And over the last 7 years, I had a really bad burnout in 2017. Lost my job. One of those classic Netflix stories. My wife left. Everything just kind of went belly up, and that forced me to make a radical rethink of my career and my life. And so I pivoted and became an executive coach, specializing in working with senior leaders in companies and startup technology founders. So today, I coach startup founders in Silicon Valley, in London, in Dubai, in South Africa, in Chile, in Mexico, in Miami, all over the world. And then, I'm also an international keynote speaker and best-selling author.
Patrick, love this. Ladies and gentlemen, I love all the different experiences, wisdom that Patrick has amassed in his career, from working at startups to PepsiCo to Google, to being honest that he burned out and said, you know what? Wow, I've really spent a lot of time doing things. Now I'm just kind of feeling burnt out. And then from there, he moved into executive coaching, speaking, becoming an author. Patrick, let's start there. Talk to our global audience, my good friend, about your book. What is it about? Give us the title, and why did you decide to make and or write this awesome book project?
Sure. I mean, it's I got a copy right here. This is the book. It was released in 2023, on Amazon, and you can get it on any digital book retailer. Title of the book is Step Back and Leap. And, I wrote it because, fundamentally, Marcus, it's, if you look at what the data is telling us, some 90 million jobs are going to go away in the United States over the next 4 years due to artificial intelligence and changes in technology and in society, right? And we're seeing that. The latest statistics that we've seen is that hiring from, recent graduates, even from top schools in the United States, is slowing down. I was privileged to go to a top MBA program, considered one of the top 3 in the world by the Financial Times. We have seen a slowdown in MBAs being hired by top companies and companies like McKinsey. And so my burnout, forced a very deep and profound question, which was, if I no longer want to be a chief marketing officer, and I spent 20 years doing that, what do I do now? Like what's next, right? And we are living at a time where more and more people are rethinking their careers. More and more people are waking up, realizing that, they've been climbing this corporate ladder for years, and guess what? They were climbing up the wrong mountain, right? They're supposed to be on a different mountain. And a lot of people, have no idea how to go about re-engineering the next version of themselves. Most of us find a job by haphazardness, right? It's like we become an accountant because our uncle was an accountant, right? We go into law or medicine because that's what our dad did, or that's what was expected of us in India, right? Whatever. And so there's no scientific thought process for how I make a career change. And that applies whether you're graduating from university today, or whether you're somebody in your 40s or 50s who has just been laid off and needs to make a career change. And so the process of me, after I got fired, figuring out what I wanted to do next, was so hard, and it was so painful that I documented it. I basically journaled, and I still journal. I had thousands of pages of journal notes over the last 10 years. I journaled my process, and I went to a book editor, and I had this ridiculous 700-page typewritten draft of a book. And my editor was like, I'll never forget this. My editor was like, dude, I love your book. The stories are amazing, but it's too long, and it's like way too detailed. So, I worked with the editor, and we eventually, trimmed it down to like, whatever it is, 252 pages now. But basically, the book is kind of like a Netflix drama, combined with a like self-development, life transformation course, right? So every chapter in the book, which is 9 chapters, 9 keys, talks about a different story of something crazy I went through. Like, for example, being the son of an expat kid and getting beaten up every day in a school in Mexico when I was 10 years old in the 1980s, all the way to getting hired at Google, which was a surprise to me. I never wanted to go to Google. They reached out to me, and initially I said no. And there's a whole chapter that talks about, going to Google and building the play marketing team. And so every chapter is like a different story in my life where I talk about something that I went through, what I learned, and then the tools that I used to get over that particular challenge in my life, right? And so it's really a story about how to transform and change your career on the one hand, but it's also a story about resilience, Marcus. And I know your story. You've been on my podcast. Your story is amazing. It's inspiring, and a big part of your story is the inspiration that you bring to people, right? As a coach, as a business guy, as a keynote speaker, as an NFL player, of somebody who's been through a lot of challenges and adversity, and then you've gotten to where you are today, right? And the same thing is true for me. I go on stages all over the world and I talk about resilience, right? And I talk about what are the 5 pillars to becoming unstoppable. And the book is all about that, right? Because I believe everybody can be unstoppable, but building resilience is a muscle. You and I both know that. And you have to train it. You have to work every day in, day out to get tougher. And most people have no idea how to do that. And so the book is all the crazy things that I went through, from Chile to Mexico to Belgium to Brazil to the US to Silicon Valley, startups, divorces, all the other, Netflix like stuff, and how to get through all that stuff. And so I think I designed it as a book that is practical yet fun and entertaining, so that anybody who really wants to make a major change in their life can hopefully read this book, use the exercises, and make progress and make the transformation that they deserve.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is such a great example of why we have the Get Authentic with Marques Ogden podcast. Authentic stories of amazing people like Patrick, saying the book is like a Netflix drama. There's ups, there's downs, there's all the rounds, right? The divorce, the struggles, this, that, and the other, burning out, all these things. And what Patrick is saying is the foundation of what allowed him to be where he's at today as an international speaker, an author, a business coach, was resilience. And I talk about this a lot, right, Patrick? I call it attributes over skills. Attributes, things that you cannot see. Resilience, grit, determination, all those things are needed. I say resilience over resistance. You're going to have more resilience in your life than when things get tough, you have to face and overcome resistance. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's awesome. Now let's move to your coaching, right, Patrick?
Sure.
You work with executives in tech, startups, all type of stuff. Give our global audience an idea of a nice, ideal customer profile for Patrick and his awesome coaching.
Sure. I mean, generally the people that I work with are men and women who are founders and CEOs of technology startups. They are in the process where they're scaling. So, they're beyond an idea. They've raised 1 or more rounds of venture capital financing. They are growing at breakneck speed, and they are facing all the challenges that come along with that growth, right? So your challenges typically, in those situations are, customer acquisition and growing revenues, right? Is a big one. Your challenges are going to be raising additional venture capital, getting more funding, and making sure you don't run out of fuel on your way to the moon, right? That's another one, is funding. But a big challenge is that you see for founders is that, I've been a founder several times. I've worked with a lot of founders. And one very real problem that founders get is it's lonely. It's nobody talks about this. It's really hard to build a company, and the more successful you are at times scaling your company, the lonelier it is at the top, right? The less you get feedback from people, feedback which is essential for your personal growth and for you to move the business forward. The more some of the decisions can feel overwhelming at times. I'm working with a founder right now who has 2 brilliant co-founders, and they are extremely difficult to manage. And he comes to me and he's like, "What do I do?" Like, part of me wants to fire these guys because I just can't deal with them, but the other part is that they're brilliant and they are the guys that make the business go forward, right? So, a big challenge for founders is 80% of your job as a founder, when you're scaling, is managing people. It's people issues. It's your ability to hire the right talent. It's your ability to keep people motivated. It's your ability to keep people engaged. It's your ability to mediate conflict, have difficult conversations, inspire people when things go horribly wrong, which they often do. And so, you know, I'm there kind of like to ask them the questions that nobody wants to ask them. I'm there to kind of like reflect a mirror at them and show them things that they haven't seen. And I do that through a combination of powerful questions, but also a series of different diagnostics, whether it's personality assessments, saboteur assessments, leadership 360s. You know, I have a custom built baseball card, which is a short document, which is a snapshot of your personality, your values, your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, your saboteurs, your Enneagram, right? And a how to work with Marcus segment at the end of each baseball card. So, a large part of a coach's job is not to tell the founder what to do, it's to help them figure out what they want to do and to help them then take action and serve as their accountability partner for them to get the job done, right? Most of these people are smart enough to know what they need to do. But you know, when we are not good at doing something or when we fear doing something, it's like, oh my God, I have to have this really painful conversation with my investor, or I have to have a real difficult conversation with my co-founder, or I have to tell my VP of engineering that we do not have budget to hire 3 more engineers. You know, people will procrastinate and they will kick the can down the road on that stuff, right? And they know they have to do it. So, as a coach, our job is to help them understand through questioning, okay, well, what's at stake if you don't have that conversation, right? What's going to happen if you do not show a certain level of assertiveness in front of that pushy salesperson that continues to break all the rules just because they're hitting their quotas? Right. And then, of course, it's like, okay, what action are you going to take? And by when are you going to do it? Right. And so that's the beauty of coaching is, you know, you're kind of a therapist, you're a teacher, you're a coach, you're their accountability buddy. And in some cases, you end up being their closest confidant, you know, all rolled into one. And, you know, I continue to work with you as my coach. You know, I've had coaches probably for the last 8 or 9 years of my career. I wish I had coaching earlier because God knows it would have helped me avoid so many mistakes. I mean, when I was at Google, they said, you should get a coach. And I was like, well, I don't need a coach. You know, I work at Google and I have an inside MBA and, you know, that's a top school. And who's going to tell me what to do? Boy, was I wrong.
Mm.
Right. So that's my job as a coach. And it's incredibly rewarding because, you know, you get to facilitate and help a person become the best version of themselves, do things which sometimes they frankly don't think they are capable of doing, um, and then hold them accountable, you know, to get to a higher level. So it's very cool work, but it's very hard work.
It's, I would say 100%, it is fantastic work. It's challenging at
Yeah.
times. You have to work through hardships at times. But I love, ladies and gentlemen, how open and authentic Patrick was about I am his business coach. He's a great client to work with. But again, we both know we don't, sometimes don't get the great clients. We get those clients that want to procrastinate, that don't want to
Mhm.
actively listen, that have to be told things more than once. And those aren't fun, but we still have to do our job at a high level. But I love what Patrick said about he wishes he would have had a coach earlier. And again, I'm the same way, right? I talk all the time. I wish I had a coach when I had my construction company, because
Yeah.
if I would have had a coach, right, Patrick, I would not have gone out of business.
So true.
So awesome stuff. Now let's get into your keynote speaking, right, Patrick? You do speaking all across the world. You've gone to Guatemala. You've done things in Poland. You've done things in the US. All the type of great stuff. Talk to our audience about your keynote speaking. We like to speak on. Who's a good
Mhm.
client for you to speak
Sure.
to? Share more about that for our global audience.
Sure. So, you know, I've spoken, yeah, literally from, you know, Google I/O to South by Southwest, Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, and then a lot of company events in between. And I've been fortunate enough to work with Google, obviously, with Walmart, with Scotiabank, with Falabella, which is the largest retailer in South America with 100,000 employees, insurance companies, banking companies, all sorts of companies. So generally, you know, the things that I get asked to speak on are the areas where I have the greatest domain expertise. Within this case, is resilience and managing change and adaptability. And you know, this is what people are struggling with, right? If you talk to most organizations today, a lot of organizations, people are feeling tired, they are feeling exhausted, they are feeling burnt out, they are afraid for their jobs and whether they're going to have a job, you know, with artificial intelligence in the next 2 or 3 years. people have to do less with more. No, sorry. They have to do more with less. And so, that requires in many cases a mindset shift. It requires us to be constantly learning new skills. And that requires us to step out of our comfort zones and face our fears, right? And so, as somebody who, has been in, 6 different industries, countless startups, worked and lived all over the world, I've learned 4 languages over the course of this crazy life that I've had. I think one of the things that I have mastered to an extent is resilience and adaptability, right? And so my signature keynote is called Become Unstoppable. And that keynote really, the objective of that keynote is to inspire, it's to entertain, and it's to educate the audience, right? I think as a good keynote speaker, and this as well, you can't just go in and say some nice stories and get people jumping up and down, right? You have to educate people and leave them with valuable tools as well, so that they can leave the session. In my case, I have QR codes in my keynotes that are connected to Mork guides, which are the same Mork guides that I share with my elite, founder clients all over the world. People in the audience get free access to these. They can just take out their phone, snap a picture, and download Mork's Guide to Resilience, or Mork's Guide to Feedback, or Mork's Guide to Imposter Syndrome or Self-Confidence, right? Whatever the topic happens to be about. But the signature keynote has Become Unstoppable. And in that keynote, I share 5 core pillars for how you become unstoppable and how you build resilience as a muscle, right? Because as I said, resilience isn't one of these things that you're born with. Like, yeah, you can have the DNA, you can, maybe you play professional sports like you did, or you in startups like I was, but you can develop this skill as a muscle. And so I talk about 5 things. I talk about, first of all, finding purpose, right? Like working in an organization that has a purpose. Many of us work in organizations that the purpose is just to make money or get market share or improve earnings per share. And guess what? That does not inspire people. People do not give a crap about earnings per share for the most part. People care about making more money, getting more responsibility, getting a promotion, and growth and learning and autonomy, right? So how do I find purpose at work? How can I find purpose in my startup if I'm a founder? How can I find purpose in my team if I lead a team? What's the purpose of my organization? Do we have one? Right? That's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2, which you're very familiar with, Marcus, is do hard things. You got to get out and do hard things. You got to get out and do things that scare you, because the neuroscience is very proven, right? When we do hard things, we get those neurons firing, we get those synapses forming. And so the next time we do hard things, it becomes a little bit easier, right? Pillar number 3, ask for help. So many of us, especially like the men in the room, we struggle to ask for help. I see you nodding because you've been there, I've been there, right? It's like, we're so smart, we're so successful, we've made so much money, we don't need any help, right? BS, right? We've never needed more help than we do now. So it's like, how do I develop the ability to ask for help? And the magic of that is when you ask for help, you also make the other person that's helping you feel really good about themselves. So everybody wins. Pillar number 4, reframe learning as failure, right? In certain cultures like Latin America, the Middle East, or Europe or Asia, failure is a terrible thing. Failure is like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. I'm done. I'm burnt out. Like, I'm humiliated. My friends are never going to talk to me. When you can reframe your failure as a source of learning, then it's easier to continue to do hard things. And pillar number 5, of course, the big one is you got to have some degree of belief and faith, right? In my case, I have a strong belief in God. I have a strong belief in something greater that allows me to let go of things that I can't control and believe that everything is going to be okay. And I'm not one to preach religion, man. I mean, whether you're like Catholic, Presbyterian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, you believe in a higher consciousness, that's your thing. But I do believe, and I have found that when I have been more connected to something greater, and I've been more thankful and grateful for what I have, for whoever is giving it to me, I'm a happier person, and I can make it through the most difficult challenges. So that's my main keynote. That's what I talk about. Audiences. I do a lot of talks for large corporations and public companies, but I've also spoken for rapidly scaling startups, industries. I've done banking, retail, consumer goods. I've done SaaS and technology. So it's really designed to inspire and help people to become tougher, to become more resilient, and to develop those skills.
Love it. Patrick, fantastic interview. How can people get in touch with you?
Easiest is just to go to my website, patrickmork.com, Patrick, Mork, as in Mork and Mindy, patrickmork.com. That's the simplest one. Nanu, if you're from that generation, you remember that. Otherwise, man, you can find me on socials. Patrick Mork Official is my Instagram and my LinkedIn. And I have a podcast called Mork Unfiltered, where you can catch my amazing interview with Marques, who I called Marques during like an hour of the show, and you never corrected me because you were a gentleman. So you can find my interview with Marques. So yeah, those are the places you can find me, and feel free to reach out. And happy to have a conversation with folks.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, fantastic interview. Reach out to Patrick. He's great as a coach, as a speaker. Pick up his book. And before we give the authentic tip, I want to leave you with one last thought on the unseen cost of the secure career. It's something I know firsthand. I have lived that cost. The real trap of my first failed business wasn't the financial hit. It was the emotional weight of letting down my family. I know that feeling of being stuck and misaligned, but I learned there's a disciplined path, a clear system to rebuild and regain true control. The Fran Dream provides that proven playbook. It's all structure, due diligence, and ongoing support so you can finally build real passive wealth for your family. This is your chance to get the clear plan. Go to podcast.thefrandream.com/Marques to secure your blueprint for a better future. That link is right there in the show notes for you to click. Again, that's podcast.thefrandream.com/Marques. Start building your secure legacy today. And the authentic tip of this great interview, as Patrick said, be an individual that understands you don't know everything. Find someone to help teach you, guide you, and assist you in where you deserve and where you desire to go. Again, my name is Marques Ogden. I am the host of the Get Authentic with Marques show. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic day.